$80,000. That is how much my husband stole from me. Not from a safe. Not from a bank account. He stole it using my name. My social security number. My signature that he learned to copy perfectly over 8 years of marriage. I am standing outside the courthouse in Beverly Hills, California right now. My hands are shaking, but not from fear. Not anymore. Today is the day everything changes. Today is the day Jonathan Adams finally pays for what he did to me. But let me take you back to the beginning. Let me show you how I got here. 18 months ago, I was living what I thought was a perfect life. I had a beautiful home in a gated community in San Jose. I had a successful husband who worked in real estate. I had a son who was my entire world. Everything looked perfect from the outside. I worked as an administrative assistant at Henderson and Associates law firm. The pay was decent. The hours were reasonable. I liked my coworkers. Life was stable. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything shattered. I came home from work early because I had a headache. I checked the mail on my way inside like I always did. Bills. Catalogs. Junk mail. And then I saw it. A bright red envelope with the words "Final Notice" stamped across the front. I figured it was a mistake. We paid our bills on time. Jonathan handled most of the finances because he said he was better with numbers. I trusted him completely. I opened the envelope anyway. The letter inside made my stomach drop. It was from a collection agency. They were demanding payment for a credit card balance of $15,000. A credit card in my name. A credit card I had never seen before in my life. My first thought was identity theft. Someone had stolen my information and opened an account. It happened all the time. I would just call the credit card company and sort it out. I called the number on the letter. I explained the situation to the customer service representative. I told her this account was fraudulent. I told her I had never applied for this card. She asked me to verify my identity. I gave her my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. Everything checked out. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. The account had been open for 3 years. The billing address was a P.O. box in Palo Alto. The card had been used regularly for purchases at electronics stores, restaurants, and online retailers. Someone had been spending money in my name for 3 years. I asked her to send me copies of the statements. She said she could email them to the address on file. I told her that was not my email address. She said she could mail them to the billing address. I told her that was not my address either. She finally agreed to send them to my actual home address. I hung up and sat on my kitchen floor for 20 minutes. My mind was racing. Who had done this? How had they gotten my information? Why had I never noticed? Then a horrible thought crept into my mind. The P.O. box was in Palo Alto. Jonathan worked in Palo Alto. Jonathan handled all our finances. Jonathan knew all my personal information. No. That was impossible. He was my husband. He loved me. He would never do something like this. I decided to wait for him to come home. I would show him the letter. He would help me figure out who had done this. We would fix it together. Jonathan came home at 7 that evening. He kissed me on the cheek like he always did. He asked about my day like he always did. He poured himself a glass of wine and sat down at the kitchen table. I placed the collection notice in front of him. He picked it up and read it slowly. I watched his face for any sign of surprise or concern. Instead, I saw something I had never seen before. A tiny smile at the corner of his mouth. He set the letter down and looked at me. I asked him if he knew anything about this credit card. He did not answer immediately. He just kept looking at me with that strange little smile. Then he said something I will never forget. He said yes. He said yes, he knew about the credit card. He said yes, he had opened it. He said yes, he had been using it for 3 years. And that was not all. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were documents. Lots of documents. Credit card applications. Loan agreements. Store financing contracts. All of them in my name. All of them with my signature. Except I had never signed any of them. He spread the documents across the table like he was proud of them. 8 different accounts. $80,000 in total debt. All of it connected to my social security number. All of it destroying my credit. I could not speak. I could not breathe. I just stared at the papers in front of me. Jonathan leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He was enjoying this. He was actually enjoying watching me fall apart. Then he explained his logic. He told me that I had signed a prenup before our wedding. He told me that under the terms of that prenup, I would get almost nothing in a divorce. He told me that with my credit score destroyed, I would not be able to rent an apartment. I would not be able to finance a car. I would not be able to get a cell phone plan. I would not be able to survive without him. So I would stay. I would keep playing the perfect wife. I would smile and pretend everything was fine. Because I had no other choice. He said 5 words that burned into my brain. Good luck raising our son with that credit score, Freya. You will never recover from this. He picked up his wine glass and took a long sip. Then he walked out of the kitchen like we had just discussed the weather. I sat at that table for hours. I looked at every document. Every signature. Every forged version of my name. Jonathan had studied my handwriting for years. He had practiced until his forgery was nearly perfect. I went to my son's room. He was already asleep. I sat on the floor next to his bed and watched him breathe. He was so peaceful. So innocent. He had no idea what his father had done. I made myself a promise that night. I would find a way out of this. I would find a way to take back everything Jonathan had stolen. I did not know how yet. But I would figure it out. Because I noticed something in those documents. Something small. Something Jonathan did not even know he was doing. A tiny detail that appeared on every single forged signature. I did not know what it meant yet. But I was going to find out. And I was going to use it to destroy him. I welcome you, my beautiful family and friends. Please click subscribe, do well to like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I started spending my lunch breaks consulting with divorce attorneys. I met with 3 different lawyers before I found one who would actually see me without a large retainer. His name was Jacob Baker. His office was in a high-rise in San Francisco's financial district. The building was shiny and intimidating. The receptionist looked at my worn shoes with barely hidden judgment. Jacob was polite but direct. He reviewed the collection notices I had brought. He looked at copies of the forged documents. He asked me questions about my marriage, my finances, my prenuptial agreement. Then he gave me the truth. He told me that proving fraud would require extensive forensic analysis. He told me I would need expert witnesses. He told me that court fees alone would be substantial. He estimated the total cost to fight this properly would be between $30,000 and $50,000. I did not have $30,000. I did not even have $3,000. Jonathan controlled all our money. But that was not the worst part. Jacob told me that even if I proved the fraud, it would take years to restore my credit. 2 to 5 years minimum. The damage was already done. The collection accounts were already on my credit report. The late payments were already recorded. I asked about the prenuptial agreement. Jacob reviewed it and shook his head. Jonathan had insisted on the prenup before our wedding. He said his family required it. He said it was just a formality. I signed it because I trusted him. Because I was young and in love. Because I never imagined I would be sitting in a lawyer's office 8 years later watching my life fall apart. The prenup heavily favored Jonathan. I would get almost nothing in a divorce. I left Jacob's office feeling worse than when I arrived. The legal system was supposed to protect people like me. Instead, it felt like one more barrier Jonathan had put in my way. At home, things got stranger. Jonathan acted like nothing had changed. He continued his normal routine. He was charming at dinner. He was attentive with our son. He helped with homework and bedtime stories. When we were alone, he watched me carefully. He was waiting for me to break down. He was waiting for me to beg. He was waiting for me to accept that I was trapped. He started gaslighting me. He said I was overreacting. He said he had only done what was necessary to maintain our lifestyle. He reminded me of the vacations we had taken. The nice restaurants. Our son's private preschool. He said I had benefited from this too. He said I was being ungrateful. When gaslighting did not work, he moved to threats. He told me that if I tried to leave, he would fight for full custody. He told me that with my destroyed credit score, no court would view me as a stable parent. He told me that I would lose my son if I did not cooperate. The threats worked. At least for a little while. I was terrified of losing my little boy. My work started to suffer. I could not concentrate. I made mistakes. I missed deadlines. My boss at Henderson and Associates noticed. She called me into her office and gave me a formal warning. I sat in the bathroom after that meeting and cried until I had no tears left. That afternoon, something changed. Someone noticed. Her name was Jasmine Morales. She was a paralegal at the firm. We had always been friendly but never close. She found me in the break room staring at nothing and sat down next to me. She asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. She said I was obviously not fine. She said she had seen me struggling for weeks. She said whatever it was, I did not have to deal with it alone. Something about the kindness in her voice broke through my defenses. I started talking. Once I started, I could not stop. I told her everything. The credit cards. The loans. The forged signatures. Jonathan's threats. The lawyer who said it would take years to fix. Jasmine listened without interrupting. When I finished, her face was hard with anger. Not at me. At Jonathan. She told me she had been through something similar. An ex-boyfriend had opened accounts in her name years ago. It had taken her a long time to recover. But she had recovered. She offered to help me research legal options. She said being a paralegal meant she knew how to find information. She said we would figure this out together. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of hope. We started spending weekends at the library. Jasmine had access to legal databases through her job. We researched identity fraud cases. We read court decisions. We looked for any angle that might help me. That is when we discovered something important. Handwriting analysis was a legitimate forensic science. Forged signatures contained microscopic tells that revealed the true writer. Even the best forgeries had flaws that experts could identify. We found academic papers about how forgers could not perfectly replicate natural writing patterns. When someone copies another person's signature, they focus on making it look right. But they cannot replicate the speed and rhythm of natural writing. Real signatures are written quickly and automatically. Forged signatures are written slowly and deliberately. This difference leaves traces that forensic experts can detect. I started to feel something new. Not just hope. Curiosity. I went back to the forged documents Jonathan had shown me. I looked at them more carefully this time. I compared them to my genuine signature on our marriage license, our mortgage documents, my work contracts. Something was different. I could not quite identify what it was. But something was definitely different. Jasmine found a video online that changed everything. It was a lecture by a retired forensic document examiner named Nicholas Hill. He had worked for the FBI for 30 years. He had testified in hundreds of fraud cases. And he lived right here in the Bay Area. He had a website offering consultations. His fee was reasonable. One line in his biography caught my attention. It said he specialized in exposing the frauds that others miss. That night, I sent him an email. I attached photos of 3 of the forged signatures. I explained my situation briefly. I asked if he could help. His response came within 2 hours. Just 4 words that made my heart race. This is clearly forged. Call me. I drove to Atherton the following Saturday. It is one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. The homes are massive. The cars are expensive. The people look like they have never worried about money in their lives. Nicholas Hill's house was different. It was modest compared to his neighbors. A simple ranch-style home with a well-kept garden. It looked like someone who cared more about substance than appearance lived there. He answered the door himself. He was in his 70s but sharp-eyed and alert. His handshake was firm. His voice was calm and measured. He led me to his home office. The room was filled with specialized equipment. Magnifying glasses with measurement tools. A microscope connected to a computer screen. Boxes of historical documents for research purposes. He offered me coffee and got straight to business. He had studied the photos I sent. Even from digital images, he could see multiple indicators of forgery. But he needed to see the original documents to make a definitive analysis. I explained that I did not have access to the originals. Jonathan kept all important documents in a safe at his real estate office. Nicholas nodded like this was a common problem. He said we would work with what we had for now. He said he would teach me what to look for. He said knowledge was the first step toward justice. He pulled up the signature images on his computer and zoomed in. He showed me things I had never noticed. At the beginning of each signature, there were tiny hesitation marks. These appeared when a writer paused before starting. Natural signatures did not have these marks because people signed their names automatically. He pointed to unnatural pen lifts in the middle of letters. When I signed my name, my pen flowed continuously through certain letter combinations. The forged signatures showed tiny breaks where Jonathan had lifted the pen and repositioned it. He showed me inconsistent pressure throughout the strokes. My natural signature had a consistent pressure pattern. The forgeries showed varying pressure as Jonathan concentrated on making each letter look right. Finally, he showed me tremors in the pen strokes. These tiny wobbles indicated slow, careful copying rather than natural writing. Speed was the key to identifying forgery. Genuine signatures were fast. Forgeries were slow. I stared at the screen in amazement. All these details had been invisible to me before. Now I could see them clearly. Nicholas explained the science behind handwriting analysis. Everyone has a unique writing signature beyond just their actual signature. This includes consistent letter formations, natural baseline angles, characteristic loops and crosses, the way we connect certain letters. When someone forges another person's signature, they focus on appearance. They try to make it look like the original. But they cannot replicate the natural rhythm. They cannot write with the same speed and confidence. This fundamental difference leaves traces that forensic experts can detect. Then he showed me something that made my heart stop. He pointed to the lowercase r in Reyes on every forged signature. There was a tiny hook at the top of the letter. My natural signature never had this hook. I looked at dozens of my genuine signatures. Not one of them had that hook on the R. Nicholas asked if I had any samples of Jonathan's handwriting. I said I could get some. Old cards. Work documents. Anything with his natural writing. Nicholas said that would be essential. He predicted that Jonathan's own handwriting would show the same characteristic hook. It would be his unconscious habit. Something impossible to suppress even when forging. This was the detail I had noticed but could not identify. This was the flaw in Jonathan's forgery. He had copied my signature almost perfectly. But he could not stop his own handwriting habits from appearing. Nicholas offered to train me in basic document analysis. He said I could learn to identify the forgery patterns myself. This would save money on expert fees. It would also make me a more credible witness if the case went to court. He gave me homework. Collect 20 samples of my genuine signature from different time periods. Bank documents. Work contracts. Old cards. Anything that could show my consistent signature pattern. He also wanted samples of Jonathan's handwriting from as many sources as possible. I left Atherton feeling different. I had a direction now. I had tools. I had knowledge. At home, Jonathan noticed the change. I was calmer. More focused. Less reactive to his provocations. He could not understand why I had stopped crying. Why I had stopped begging. Why I had stopped fighting. He started watching me more closely. He checked my phone when he thought I was not looking. He asked pointed questions about where I went on weekends. I told him I was visiting a friend from college. He seemed to accept this. But I could tell he was suspicious. I spent the next 3 weeks collecting evidence and studying. Jasmine helped me gather documents from various sources. I photographed everything using a high-resolution camera Nicholas had lent me. I found old greeting cards Jonathan had written to me over the years. Love notes from our dating period. Birthday cards with long messages. Perfect samples of his natural handwriting. I compared his handwriting to the forged signatures. The R hook was there. On every single sample of Jonathan's writing, the lowercase r had that tiny hook at the top. He could not hide his own habits. Even when forging my name, his hand did what it had always done. Then I made another discovery. One that Nicholas himself had missed. I was examining the forged documents under the magnifying equipment Nicholas had taught me to use. I noticed something strange. On every single document, in the same exact spot near the signature, there was a microscopic indentation. Not a pen mark. An indentation. Like something had pressed against the paper before Jonathan signed. I called Nicholas and described what I had found. He asked me to photograph it and send the images immediately. An hour later, he called me back. His voice was different. Excited. He asked if I knew what those indentations were. I told him I had a theory. Tracing paper. Jonathan had traced my signature every single time. He placed tracing paper over a copy of my genuine signature and practiced. Then he placed the tracing paper over the document and traced the signature again. The pressure from the tracing paper left an impression on the document below. Nicholas confirmed my theory. He said in his 30 years with the FBI, he had seen this pattern many times. Forgers who used tracing paper always left this evidence behind without realizing it. Now we had him. We had scientific proof that the signatures were forged. We had proof of the method he used. We had a trail that led directly back to Jonathan. The only question now was how to use it. The next 3 months changed me completely. I spent every evening studying forensic document analysis. I practiced identifying authentic versus forged signatures using sample sets Nicholas provided. I read textbooks on questioned document examination. I watched court testimonies from forensic experts to understand how evidence was presented. My eye became sharp. I could spot hesitation marks from across a room. I could identify unnatural pen lifts in seconds. I learned to recognize the subtle signs that separated genuine writing from careful imitation. During the day, I worked on gathering evidence without Jonathan's knowledge. I photographed documents around the house whenever he was not home. I found old greeting cards he had written to me over the years. Bank forms with his genuine signature. Job applications. Insurance documents. Everything went into a secure cloud folder that Jasmine helped me set up. The P.O. Box investigation revealed the full scope of Jonathan's planning. Jasmine helped me track down records from the Palo Alto post office. Using my identity documents, we obtained information about when the P.O. Box was opened. It had been active for 4 years. Since before our son was born. Jonathan had been planning this fraud since the early years of our marriage. Every credit card statement, collection notice, and loan document had been sent to that box. He had intercepted everything. I never had a chance to discover what he was doing. This was not impulsive behavior. This was calculated destruction. Nicholas taught me about the patterns of spousal identity fraud. It often begins with one small account to test if the victim notices. When nothing happens, the fraudster becomes bolder. They open more accounts. They take larger loans. They establish separate mailing addresses to intercept all evidence. Most victims do not discover the fraud until years later. By then, the damage is catastrophic. I was one of those victims. But I was not going to remain a victim. Then I discovered something that changed everything. While researching online, I found public records from Jonathan's past. He had been married twice before. Once to a woman in Seattle. Once to a woman in Newport Beach. Both marriages had ended in divorce. This information was not on any of his social media. He had never mentioned these marriages. As far as I knew, I was his first wife. I spent days tracking down information about the divorces. The court records were public but sparse. They showed standard divorce proceedings. No criminal charges. No accusations of fraud. I found the Seattle ex-wife through social media. Her profile was private, but I sent her a message anyway. I explained who I was. I said Jonathan was my husband. I asked if she would be willing to talk. Her response came within an hour. She said Jonathan had done the exact same thing to her. We arranged a video call. She was nervous at first. She said she had spent years trying to forget what happened. She said talking about it brought everything back. Then she told me her story. Jonathan had destroyed her credit during their 3-year marriage. He had opened accounts in her name without her knowledge. He had forged her signature on loan documents. When she discovered the fraud, he had convinced authorities that she had authorized everything. She tried to fight him in court. She lost. She had no evidence of forgery. She could not prove he had signed her name. It was her word against his, and he was more convincing. She spent 7 years recovering financially. Her credit score had been destroyed. She could not rent apartments. She could not get car loans. She had to rebuild her entire life from scratch. She warned me. She said Jonathan was smarter than he appeared. She said he would know if I was building a case against him. She said he had some kind of sixth sense for detecting threats. I thanked her for her courage in sharing. I promised to be careful. After that call, I understood what I was dealing with. Jonathan was not just a husband who made bad decisions. He was a predator. He targeted women, built relationships, destroyed their credit, and moved on. The pattern was clear. The Seattle wife. The Newport Beach wife. Now me. He never faced consequences because his victims could not prove the forgery. They did not have expert knowledge. They did not have forensic evidence. They did not have years of documentation. But I had all of those things. Jonathan's paranoia increased as the weeks passed. He noticed me working late on my laptop. He could not access my computer because I had changed all my passwords. He tried to install monitoring software on my phone, but Jasmine had taught me how to detect it. He started showing up unexpectedly at my workplace. He said he was in the area for meetings. He said he wanted to take me to lunch. Really, he was checking up on me. His control became more obvious. He questioned every purchase I made. He monitored my gas mileage to track where I was driving. He called me multiple times per day to verify my location. One night, he cornered me in our kitchen. His voice was cold and threatening. He said he knew I was planning something. He said whatever I thought I was going to do, I needed to stop. He said if I tried to fight him, he would take our son. He would prove I was an unfit mother. He would use my destroyed credit score against me in family court. I would never see my little boy again. I stayed calm. I showed no reaction. I told him I did not know what he was talking about. I said I was just trying to get through each day. Inside, I was terrified. But I was also more determined than ever. I needed one more piece of evidence. The original forged documents. The copies I had photographed showed the forgery indicators. But the originals would show the tracing paper indentations clearly. They would prove the method Jonathan had used. But Jonathan kept all the original documents in a safe at his real estate office. A safe I did not have access to. I was running out of options. Then Jasmine gave me an idea that changed everything. She asked what if I did not need to get into the safe. What if I could make Jonathan bring the documents to me? I did not understand at first. She explained that in divorce proceedings, there was a legal process called discovery. Both parties had to produce original documents related to disputed finances. If I filed for divorce and requested discovery, Jonathan would be legally required to bring every financial document to court. He would walk into the courtroom carrying exactly what I needed to destroy him. All I had to do was file for divorce. All I had to do was let him think he had already won. Before we continue with this story, I need you to do something for me. I pour my heart into these stories, and it genuinely hurts when people watch without subscribing. Please, just take 1 second and subscribe. It's free, and it means the world to me. Also, drop a comment telling me which city you are watching from. I want to know where all my amazing viewers are located. Please do well to subscribe now. Now, let's continue. I returned to Jacob Baker's office in San Francisco. This time, I had a different approach. I told him I wanted to file for divorce. I said I was not fighting the prenup. I was not disputing Jonathan's claims. I wanted a quick, clean divorce with minimal conflict. Jacob looked confused. He reminded me that with the prenup, I would get almost nothing. He reminded me that Jonathan had destroyed my credit. He asked if I understood what I was giving up. I said I understood completely. Jacob agreed to proceed. He seemed relieved actually. He had probably assumed I would want to fight, and fighting would have been expensive and exhausting. I paid his retainer using money Jasmine had secretly lent me from her savings. She refused to call it a loan. She said it was an investment in justice. Jonathan received the divorce papers at his office 3 days later. His reaction was exactly what I expected. Surprise at first. Then smugness. He had expected me to fight. He had expected me to drag things out. He had prepared for a long battle. Instead, I was surrendering. He called me that evening, his voice dripping with false concern. He asked if I was sure about this. He said he was willing to work on the marriage. He said we could go to counseling. I told him my decision was final. I told him I wanted the divorce to be quick and simple. I said I was tired of fighting. He agreed immediately. Too quickly. He was eager to lock in his victory before I changed my mind. Over the following weeks, I agreed to all of Jonathan's initial demands. I accepted the prenup terms. I agreed to split custody of our son. I did not mention the $80,000 in debt. I did not mention the fraud. I did not mention the forged signatures. I showed no anger. No resentment. No fight. Jonathan became suspicious. He had expected resistance. He had prepared arguments and counterattacks. Instead, I was cooperating completely. He started asking questions. Why was I being so agreeable? What was I planning? Why had I given up so easily? I told him I was just tired. I told him I wanted to move on with my life. I told him fighting would only hurt our son. He seemed to accept this explanation, but I could see doubt in his eyes. Jasmine and I continued our preparation in secret. She had discovered a critical legal procedure that would be the key to our plan. In divorce cases involving disputed finances, either party could request document discovery. This process forced both parties to produce original financial documents for examination. The request could include any documents related to credit accounts in either party's name. Jonathan would have to bring every forged document to court. The originals, not copies. Documents that could be examined by forensic experts. Documents that would show the tracing paper indentations and hesitation marks. Jacob filed the discovery request. He listed all credit accounts in my name. He specified that original documents were required. Jonathan's attorney was a high-priced lawyer from a major firm in San Francisco. He reviewed the request and agreed without concern. They assumed I was just going through the motions. They assumed I could not prove anything. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I continued my training with Nicholas. We prepared a detailed forensic report on the signature forgeries. The report documented every indicator of fraud. Hesitation marks on all forged signatures. The consistent or hook matching Jonathan's handwriting. Tracing paper indentations visible under proper examination. Speed analysis showing slow deliberate strokes rather than natural signing. Nicholas agreed to testify as an expert witness. His credentials were impeccable. His analysis was thorough. His conclusions were damning. Then something unexpected happened. Jonathan's new girlfriend became our secret ally. Her name was Sienna Chavez. She was younger than me, ambitious, completely unaware of Jonathan's history. He had started dating her shortly after I filed for divorce. She posted photos of them on social media. Happy couples at expensive restaurants. Romantic weekends in Napa Valley. I reached out to her through a mutual acquaintance. I did not accuse Jonathan of anything. I simply sent a message saying I hoped she was well. I said I wanted to warn her to protect her personal information. I said Jonathan had access to sensitive documents and she should be careful. Sienna became curious. She started paying attention to Jonathan's behavior. She noticed he was protective of his phone and laptop. She noticed he asked a lot of questions about her financial history. Then she found something that made her blood run cold. She discovered a folder on his laptop labeled with her name. Inside were copies of her driver's license, her social security card, her bank statements, her signature from various documents. He was preparing to do to her exactly what he had done to me. She contacted me in a panic. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Menlo Park. She was shaking when she arrived. She looked like she had not slept in days. I explained everything. I told her about the $80,000. The forged signatures. The destroyed credit. The threats. The previous wives. Sienna listened with growing horror. She had thought Jonathan was charming and successful. She had thought she had found her perfect partner. Instead, she had nearly become his next victim. She agreed to help. She would stay with Jonathan. She would pretend everything was normal. She would gather additional evidence of his fraud. She would document his behavior and his plans. It was dangerous. If Jonathan discovered what she was doing, there would be consequences. But Sienna was determined. She said she would not let him hurt anyone else. The court date was set for 3 weeks away. Jonathan remained confident. He started telling friends that I had given up. He told his parents that I had finally accepted reality. He bragged to his colleagues about his easy victory. He had no idea what was waiting for him in that courtroom. The final weeks before court were the most intense of my life. During the day, I continued working at Henderson and Associates. My performance had improved dramatically. The focus I was applying to my case carried over into my work. My boss noticed and complimented my turnaround. At night, I prepared for the courtroom. Nicholas ran mock examinations with me. He played the role of Jonathan's attorney, asking aggressive questions designed to shake my credibility. He taught me how to remain calm under pressure. He taught me how to explain forensic evidence in simple terms that anyone could understand. I practiced presenting the evidence clearly. I memorized the key points. Hesitation marks at the beginning of forged signatures. Unnatural pen lifts in the middle of letters. The characteristic or hook that appeared in Jonathan's natural handwriting. The tracing paper indentations that proved his method. Jasmine tested me with surprise questions. What if the judge did not allow the evidence? What if Jonathan's lawyer claimed the analysis was unreliable? What if Jonathan lied convincingly on the stand? I had answers for everything. Meanwhile, Jonathan's overconfidence grew by the day. He hired one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the Bay Area. The firm was based in Pacific Heights. Their offices probably cost more per month than I made in a year. He told everyone the divorce would be simple. He bragged about the prenup. He said his soon-to-be ex-wife had finally accepted that she could not win. He started spending money lavishly. New clothes. New watch. Expensive dinners with Sienna. He was already celebrating his victory. Sienna continued gathering evidence from inside his world. She photographed documents in Jonathan's home office whenever he was out. She found records showing he had used the same scheme in his previous marriages. She found bank statements showing money transfers to hidden accounts in his name only. She copied everything to a USB drive and passed it to me through Jasmine. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 wives. 3 destroyed credit scores. Thousands of dollars in forged debt. A clear pattern of predatory behavior. 1 week before court, we held our final preparation meeting. Nicholas, Jasmine, and I gathered at Nicholas's home in Atherton. We reviewed every piece of evidence. The original forged documents that Jonathan's attorney had produced in discovery. Nicholas's forensic analysis report with detailed photographs. Handwriting comparison charts showing the hook pattern. Evidence of tracing paper indentations. A written statement from the Seattle ex-wife describing her experience. Sienna's evidence of Jonathan's ongoing fraud preparation. Everything was organized. Everything was documented. Everything was ready. Jacob Baker called me the day before the hearing. Jonathan's attorney had reached out with a settlement offer. The offer was this: I would drop all claims and accept the prenup terms. I would receive minimal custody. In exchange, Jonathan would not pursue me for any of the debt in my name. Jacob recommended accepting. He said it would end the nightmare faster. He said even with our evidence, court cases were unpredictable. I said no. Jacob was silent for a long moment. Then he said he would see me in court tomorrow. That night, I received an unexpected phone call. It was the second ex-wife. The one from Newport Beach. She had heard about my case through the Seattle ex-wife. They had connected through the message I had sent. She had been afraid to speak up before. But knowing she was not alone had given her courage. She had original documents from her divorce with Jonathan. Documents that showed the same forged signature pattern. The same hesitation marks. The same R-hook. The same tracing paper indentations. She offered to send everything via overnight mail. It would arrive before the hearing. This was the final piece. Proof that Jonathan had done this before. Proof of a criminal pattern. Proof that would make his denial impossible. I thanked her with tears in my eyes. I told her that her courage would help bring him down. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Jonathan. He was breaking court protocol by contacting me directly. His voice was cold and threatening. He said he did not know what I thought I was doing. He said this was my last chance to end things quietly. He said I should take the settlement and move on with my life. If I fought him tomorrow, he would make sure I lost our son forever. I listened without responding. When he finished, I spoke calmly. I said I would see him in court. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking. But my resolve was stronger than ever. That night, I sat in my son's room and watched him sleep. He was so peaceful. So unaware of what was happening. I thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. What if the judge did not allow the evidence? What if Jonathan's expensive lawyer found a way to discredit Nicholas? What if I froze on the stand? Then I remembered what my mother used to tell me before she passed. The truth is the most powerful weapon. People can argue with opinions, but they cannot argue with facts. Tomorrow, I would walk into that courtroom with facts. Jonathan would walk in with lies. And I knew exactly what question would destroy him. The morning of the hearing was bright and clear. I arrived at the Beverly Hills courthouse early. The venue had changed due to a scheduling conflict, which seemed fitting. Beverly Hills. One of the wealthiest cities in America. The perfect setting for Jonathan's downfall. I wore a simple professional outfit. Nothing flashy. Nothing designed to impress. I wanted the judge to focus on the evidence, not my appearance. Jasmine met me outside the courthouse. She had taken the day off work to be there. Her presence calmed my nerves. She reminded me that we had prepared for everything. She reminded me that the truth was on my side. Nicholas Hill arrived carrying a briefcase full of exhibits. He was wearing his best suit. His credentials were impeccable. His analysis was thorough. He was ready to destroy Jonathan's lies with science. Jacob Baker looked nervous. He had never handled a case quite like this. But he had done his job well. The discovery request had forced Jonathan to produce the original documents. Everything we needed was now in evidence. We entered the courtroom and took our places. Jonathan arrived 15 minutes late. He walked in like he owned the building. His suit was clearly expensive. His watch caught the light. Sienna was on his arm, playing the role of supportive girlfriend. She caught my eye briefly and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Jonathan was smiling. Shaking hands with court personnel. Chatting with his attorney like they were at a cocktail party. He did not look at me. He did not acknowledge my existence. He was already living in a world where he had won. His attorney was equally confident. The man carried a leather briefcase and moved with the arrogance of someone who rarely lost. They took their places at the opposing table. Then Judge Claire Gutierrez entered. The room fell silent. Everyone rose as she took her seat. Judge Gutierrez was a sharp-featured woman with an intense gaze. She had a reputation throughout the Bay Area as someone who did not tolerate deception. She had a background in financial crime. She asked questions that trapped lying witnesses. Jonathan had never dealt with someone like her. The judge reviewed the case file briefly. Then she called for opening statements. Jonathan's attorney went first. He portrayed his client as a successful businessman going through an unfortunate divorce. He emphasized the prenuptial agreement. He suggested I was wasting the court's time with baseless claims about fraud. His voice was smooth and confident. He made Jonathan sound like a reasonable man dealing with an unreasonable situation. Jacob's opening statement was simple and direct. Your Honor, we have evidence of systematic fraud. The judge's eyes sharpened with interest. Jonathan's attorney called his client to the stand. Jonathan was sworn in and took his seat. He looked relaxed. Charming. Completely at ease. His attorney asked softball questions about his career, his marriage, his hopes for a fair resolution. Jonathan presented himself as a loving husband who had tried to save the marriage. He expressed sadness about the divorce. He said he only wanted what was best for their son. Then his attorney asked about the credit accounts. Jonathan's face shifted to concerned confusion. He said yes, there were accounts in his wife's name. He said yes, there were significant balances. He said he had been aware of the problem but did not know how to address it. He claimed I was irresponsible with money. He claimed I had authorized all the accounts. He claimed I was now lying about the fraud to gain advantage in the divorce. His performance was convincing. If I had not known the truth, I might have believed him. The judge listened without expression. Her pen moved across her notepad steadily. Jacob approached for cross-examination. He held up the forged documents that had been produced in discovery. He showed Jonathan each credit card application, each loan agreement, each account opening form. He asked Jonathan to confirm that those were his wife's signatures. Jonathan confirmed without hesitation. Yes, those were my signatures. I had authorized all those accounts. Then Jacob asked, "Did you ever sign any document on your wife's behalf?" Jonathan's answer was firm. "Never. Those are her signatures." He seemed completely confident in his lie. Jacob returned to our table. Then he called our expert witness. Nicholas Hill approached the stand. Jonathan's attorney immediately objected. He claimed the witness had not been properly disclosed. He demanded the testimony be excluded. Judge Gutierrez reviewed the paperwork carefully. The disclosure had been filed correctly. It was dated 3 weeks ago. Jonathan's attorney had simply overlooked it. The objection was overruled. Nicholas took his seat on the witness stand. Jacob walked him through his credentials. 30 years with the FBI. Over 400 cases involving forgery and questioned documents. Published research. Expert testimony in courts across the country. Jonathan's confidence flickered for the first time. Nicholas presented his analysis. He used exhibit boards showing magnified images of the signatures. He pointed out the hesitation marks at the beginning of each forged signature. He explained the unnatural pen lifts in the middle of letters. He demonstrated the inconsistent pressure patterns. He showed the comparison between my genuine signatures and the forged ones. The differences were now obvious to everyone in the room. Then he showed the R hook. He pointed to the lowercase r in Reyes on every forged document. The tiny hook at the top of the letter. He showed samples of my genuine signature. None of them had the hook. He showed samples of Jonathan's handwriting. Cards. Forms. Applications. Every single one had that same hook on the lowercase r. It was Jonathan's unconscious habit. Present in his own writing. Present in every signature he had forged. Finally, Nicholas showed the tracing paper indentations. Microscopic impressions in the documents. Evidence that the signatures had been traced from a master copy. Proof of the method Jonathan had used. His conclusion was devastating. In my expert opinion, these signatures were not written by Freya Reyes. They were forged by someone who carefully studied her signature but could not replicate its natural flow. The characteristic R hook and tracing indentations indicate the forger was the person whose handwriting sample shows those same characteristics. That person is Jonathan Adams. The courtroom was silent. Jonathan's face had lost all color. He was whispering urgently to his attorney. His attorney requested a recess. Judge Gutierrez granted 15 minutes. When court resumed, something had changed. Jonathan was no longer smiling. His confidence was gone. He kept touching his tie like it was choking him. His attorney looked less certain than before. He was shuffling through papers, searching for something that could save his client. Then Judge Gutierrez did something unexpected. She announced that she had questions of her own for the witness. This was within her authority. Judges could question witnesses directly to clarify testimony. Jonathan's attorney could not object. But she did not question Nicholas. She called Jonathan back to the stand. He was still under oath from his earlier testimony. He took his seat with visible reluctance. The judge began with simple questions. She asked about his education. He mentioned his business degree from UCLA. She asked about his real estate career. He described his success, his properties, his expertise in the market. He seemed to relax slightly. These were easy questions. Comfortable topics. Then she turned. Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. She asked, Mr. Adams, you testified earlier that all these signatures are your wife's genuine signatures, correct? Jonathan confirmed, yes, Your Honor. She continued, and you testified that you never signed any document on her behalf? Jonathan confirmed again, that is correct. The judge nodded slowly. She picked up one of the forged documents from the evidence table. She pointed to the signature. Mr. Adams, I have a simple question about this signature. Jonathan swallowed visibly. Look at the lowercase r in Reyes. Do you see this small hook at the top of the letter? Jonathan leaned forward. He looked at the signature for a long moment. Then he said, I see it. The judge continued, now I am going to show you 3 samples of your own signature from documents you submitted to this court. She displayed exhibits showing Jonathan's genuine signatures. Bank documents. Loan applications. Forms he had signed himself. She pointed to the R in Adams. Do you see the same hook? Jonathan stared at the exhibits. His face went pale. The hook was there. Identical to the one in the forged signatures. His own unconscious habit, visible for everyone to see. Mr. Adams, the judge said slowly, can you explain why your wife's alleged signature contains a characteristic that matches your own handwriting but does not appear in any sample of her genuine signature? Jonathan's mouth opened and closed. He stammered, that is just a coincidence. The judge's expression did not change. A coincidence that appears on every single document? Across 8 different accounts? Over 4 years? Jonathan had no answer. He looked desperately at his attorney. His attorney was staring at the evidence boards. Jonathan tried to explain. Maybe Freya changed her signature over time. Maybe the documents were altered. Maybe he did not remember the details correctly. Each explanation contradicted the previous one. Each answer dug his hole deeper. The judge let him talk. She let his lies compound upon themselves. Then something extraordinary happened. From the gallery, Sienna Chavez stood up. She walked toward the court clerk. She handed over the USB drive she had been hiding for weeks. Jonathan saw this and his face twisted with panic. He shouted, she has nothing to do with this. Judge Gutierrez called for order. She accepted the USB drive and asked Sienna to identify its contents. Sienna's voice was steady. She said the drive contained documents from Jonathan's personal files. Records showing he was preparing to commit the same fraud against her. Copies of her identification documents. Her social security number. Practice copies of her signature. She also said it contained evidence of his previous marriages. The same pattern repeated with other women. Jonathan's attorney requested a recess. He looked desperate now. Judge Gutierrez refused. She said the court had heard enough to make a determination. Jonathan made one final attempt. He tried to charm his way out. He said this was all a misunderstanding. He said his wife and he had financial difficulties. He said she may have forgotten that she authorized the accounts. He said he was only trying to help their family. His voice was pleading. Desperate. Nothing like the confident man who had walked into the courtroom hours earlier. The judge looked at him without expression. Mr. Adams, she said, I have reviewed forged signature cases for 15 years. I have never seen a clearer example of deliberate fraud than what I have witnessed today. Jonathan opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. The judge began writing. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of her pen. Everyone waited. When she finally looked up, her voice was calm and final. I am prepared to issue my ruling. However, before I do, I want to inform Mr. Adams that I will be referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Identity fraud is a felony in the state of California. She paused. Mr. Adams, you may want to consult with a criminal defense attorney. Jonathan slumped in his chair. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a costume. His confident smile was gone forever. I sat at my table and watched the man who had tried to destroy my life finally face the consequences of his actions. I had not said a single word during the entire hearing. The evidence had spoken for itself. Judge Gutierrez delivered her ruling the same afternoon. She declared the prenuptial agreement void due to fraud. Jonathan had induced me to sign it while secretly planning to commit identity fraud against me. The document was tainted from the beginning. She ordered Jonathan to assume full responsibility for all fraudulent debt. Every dollar of the $80,000 would be removed from my credit report and transferred to his. She awarded me primary custody of our son. Jonathan would have supervised visitation only, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. She ordered full restitution plus damages. Jonathan would pay for my legal fees, my credit restoration costs, and compensation for the emotional distress he had caused. She recommended an expedited credit repair process through the court system. With her ruling declaring the fraud, credit bureaus would be required to remove all fraudulent accounts from my record. Jonathan was ordered to surrender his passport immediately. He was facing potential criminal charges. His real estate license would be reviewed by the state licensing board. His attorney had nothing left to say. After the ruling, I stood outside the courthouse in the afternoon sun. Jasmine hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Nicholas shook my hand with quiet pride. Jacob Baker looked stunned. He said he had never seen a case turn so completely. Sienna approached me tentatively. She apologized for not knowing sooner. She apologized for being with Jonathan. She thanked me for warning her before he could destroy her too. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She was another one of his victims. The difference was she had escaped before the damage was done. The months that followed brought more changes. The district attorney charged Jonathan with 8 counts of identity fraud. His previous victims from Seattle and Newport Beach were contacted. Their cases were reopened. The pattern of behavior was now documented across 3 states. Jonathan faced up to 15 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Sienna testified against him in exchange for immunity. The Seattle ex-wife provided her documents. The Newport Beach ex-wife came forward with her story. The case against him was overwhelming. He pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would expose everything. The judge sentenced him to 7 years. My credit recovery began immediately after the ruling. I met with a credit counselor recommended by Nicholas. With the court ruling declaring fraud, the credit bureaus had to remove all fraudulent accounts. My score began improving within weeks. 3 months after the hearing, my credit score had risen from 412 to 580. I was approved for a modest apartment in Sunnyvale. It was small but clean. It was mine. 6 months later, my score had reached 650. I qualified for a reasonable car loan. I could finally stop borrowing Jasmine's old sedan. I received a promotion at Henderson and Associates. My boss said whatever I had gone through had made me stronger. My focus and attention to detail had become my greatest professional assets. Nicholas called me with an offer that changed my career path. He wanted to recommend me for a forensic document analysis certification program. He said I had learned faster than any student he had ever trained. He said I had natural talent for this work. I enrolled in the program while continuing to work. The classes were demanding but fascinating. I was learning to help other victims build their cases. I was turning my nightmare into expertise. 1 year after the court hearing, I completed my certification. I became a junior forensic document analyst. I now worked on fraud cases professionally, helping others who had been victimized by people they trusted. My credit score had recovered to 720. I qualified for a mortgage. I bought a small home in Fremont for me and my son. The day I signed the closing documents, I thought about Jonathan sitting in prison. He had told me I would never recover. He had said good luck raising our son with that credit score. He had been certain he had destroyed me. He was wrong. My son thrived in his new school. He made friends easily. He laughed often. He did not seem to carry any scars from the divorce. Children are resilient when they are loved. I received a letter from prison about a year after Jonathan's conviction. It was from him. The letter was an attempted apology mixed with blame. He admitted some responsibility but made excuses. He blamed his childhood. His first failed marriage. Pressure to succeed. He ended with these words, "You destroyed my life. I hope you are happy." I read the letter once. I folded it carefully. I placed it in a folder labeled closure. I did not respond. Some people never understand that they destroyed themselves. Jonathan still believed he was the victim. He would probably believe that for the rest of his life. I chose not to carry anger anymore. Anger was heavy. It would only slow me down. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. The life Jonathan had tried to prevent me from having. I think about my mother sometimes. She died when I was 19. She never met my son. She never saw my wedding. She never knew the man I married would try to destroy me. But she gave me something more valuable than any of that. She gave me the belief that truth matters. That facts are powerful. That persistence beats manipulation. She used to say the truth is the most powerful weapon. People can argue with opinions, but they cannot argue with facts. She was right. I am sitting at my desk now. Sunlight comes through the window. There is a photo of my son on my desk. There is a certificate on my wall showing my forensic analyst credentials. I am reviewing documents for my next case. Another woman who was defrauded by someone she trusted. Another stack of forged signatures. Another victim who was told she could not prove anything. She reminds me of myself 18 months ago. Scared. Overwhelmed. Convinced she was trapped. I will help her see what I learned to see. The hesitation marks. The unnatural pen lifts. The unconscious habits that forgers cannot suppress. I will teach her that the truth leaves traces. That lies, no matter how carefully crafted, always have flaws. That the people who hurt us usually underestimate what we are capable of. Jonathan thought I would crumble when he walked into that courtroom. He thought his expensive lawyer and his charming smile would save him. He thought the legal system would protect him like it had protected him twice before. Instead, I watched him crumble when the judge asked him one simple question about his signature. A credit score is just a number. It can be damaged, and it can be rebuilt. What Jonathan could not damage was my determination. He could not forge that. He could not steal that. And in the end, that is what destroyed him. If you are watching this and you are in a similar situation, I want you to know something. The moment you stop fighting is the moment they win. Document everything. Learn everything. Find the people who can help you see what you have been missing. Some days, justice takes time. But when it comes, it is worth the wait. I pick up my magnifying glass. I opened the file for my next case. I get to work. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.